Qlik Dork back again, and I have to start out by apologizing to inputs all around the world. The amount of emails we were getting and letters and phone calls and inputs threatening to call congressmen and senators complaining that I talked about outputs first, I am so sorry. Get out of here. We have nothing to apologize for, little inputs. I'm sorry your feelings were hurt, but let's face it, in any coding world, the most important thing is a developer's ability to debug what they're working on. Of course, we had to start out by talking about outputs because that's how you would debug what's going on and what's being flowed through. Naturally, we're going to spend time talking about you because, like, you're the heart of the thing. Nothing works if I don't get good inputs. But to help developers, we had to talk about outputs first, so get over it. The crazy thing, I'm going to talk about inputs by showing you output again. I'm going to drag this output block from our basic building blocks here right onto our makerspace. As I showed you in our output video, it's going to default from the last main block that was part of the normal loop. And so it defaults to saying, show me my starting block. And if I have this set to triggered, remember, I get a URL. And so I'm going to take that URL. Let me save this. I'm going to come right over to Postman. I'm going to paste this in here. And if I call this, you're going to see that we have no output because there was no input. Now, I have not defined any input blocks here, have I? It's purely start, show me what got passed in to the starting block. Well, what if I say I would like to pass you field 1? Here is some chocolate. Well, that won't work because I don't expect any inputs in my automation, right? Oh, wait a second. My start block accepts any inputs that you pass me. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pass you a field 2 while we're at it. Hey, let's pass it a giant Mountain Dew while we're here. I mean, they're free. We can pass any input we want, right? And sure enough, I get the output. Here's a giant Mountain Dew. Now, I'm looking at that through Postman. If I were to go to my output and look, let's close this, and I look at my history, you'll see I've got those outputs passed to me because it passes to the output block whatever comes in. So why do I need an input block anyway? Why is it even there? Well, notice I have no idea what to pass in. That's not a very maintainable process by saying, hey, I'll just do work on whatever you pass me, have fun. Right? That's crazy. What world will we be living in if I just haphazardly start throwing in fields and calling whatever I want into my application? Right? That wouldn't make any sense. So naturally, we want to define an input block to define those parameters. If I need field 1 passed in, fantastic. I can give it some help text like, hey, input a value here. I also want another field here. We're going to say that this is field 2. Input your favorite beverage. Right? That help text gets used if I run this automation that's supposed to be triggered by the outside world, but I run it here manually to test whether it's going to flow. So if I run it manually, it comes in and says, hey, input a value here. Okay, ABC. Oh, input your favorite beverage. Well, now that's a little bit more helpful. And I say Mountain Dew. And, oh, my automation doesn't have any output. That can't be right. Something's broke. Oh, no. Let's take a look. Oh yeah, that's right. We were outputting what was passed to the start block by being triggered, which we weren't. I don't want that as my output. I would much rather here have what got passed to me as my inputs passed to my output block. I could choose to pick field 1, I could choose to pick field 2, or I can just say, you know what, whatever array of values gets passed to me, that's what I want to go into my output. And if I rerun this from here and I pass values again, now my output block shows me that array of values. Let's talk about one other thing regarding these inputs. What we didn't look at was the fact that this little checkbox gets set here that says this field is required, this field is required. I'm going to add a third field and show you the problem with that. We're going to call this one field 3. Tell me your favorite candy bar. And I'm going to mark that it is required. I'm going to come back to Postman, and all I'm going to do is pass it field 1 and field 2. I'm not going to pass it field 3, even though it's required. And I send it, and it's like, hey, whoa, 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 I am not going to work on this automation because I won't know what to do because I depend on field 3 to tell me something. There might be a conditional, which we have not talked about yet, but we certainly will soon. We're coming, ooh, it looks like it might be the next video. I can say, you know what, that'd be nice to know your favorite candy bar, but it is not mandatory. And so if I were to run this again, voila, I will do my work on field 1 or 2. And maybe I end up putting a conditional expression that says, oh, if field 3 has a value, then do this. Otherwise, use this default value that I want to have available to me. Now, this is all great to understand how the inputs and the outputs work, but we're not doing these things for fun, right? We're not always going to say, oh, gee, I spent a month building a Qlik automation that I can run through Postman, right? That's just a fun starting tool for real developers who are used to using these things that way. What we're going to eventually do is we're going to want to call these things from our Qlik application, maybe as part of a dashboard. If these aren't 100% automated, I need the user to take action. That's kind of what active intelligence is about, right? I'm doing some crazy analysis and I want to take action. We're going to look now at 2 possible ways to take action on data that is in my application. One that we'll look at second is going to be, I just want to press a button that calls an automation. That's all the button is going to do. The other might be, oh, you know what? Gosh, I don't necessarily want to take action on everything. I want the user to decide based on something. Maybe a prediction from artificial intelligence comes back and is in this row that says, hey, you should do this, you should do that. And the user says, you know what? As I look at all these other fancy charts and I'm consuming all this data, of course, that would really be in my application, yes, I would like to go do an action on that. Well, notice here that I've created a URL behind each one of these rows that I'm filling in the housekeeper as field 1, and I'm filling in the room as field 2. Let me show you how I did that. When I do put inputs, my URL comes back and shows me what my syntax should be. And so I can take that URL, I showed you how to paste it into Postman. Well, guess what? I did the same thing within a table here. So my housekeeper has a URL. Here's my URL, here's my call to cloud, here's my call my automation, here's my execution token, and oh, by the way, I want to pass field 1's value is, and I concatenate in data from my table or values from a variable like a slider. And so I can pass those values in to that URL so that when I call it, I'm not passing it everything. I'm literally just passing it this row of data. And so if I pass it Nina Andrews, look at that. I get the output automatically for me for calling Nina Andrews. And if I come back and look at this and I close this up and I look at my history again, sure enough, I have Nina Andrews. Well, let's come back and pick this row, 3 West 4 for Garrett Joseph. I call that automation. If I come back and I look at my output, look at that. If I'm looking at my last run as part of my automation, it's going to show me automatically what got called last. How cool is that? I can define input parameters very easily. And then I go off and I do this magnificent automation to work on that one row of data so that my end users, based on whatever logic they want to use that they're augmenting or some prescriptive analytics has said, this is what you should do, but life and death situations make you have to be the decider to actually press the button. I can pass individual row values, or what I'd like to be able to do is say, hey, I've got a button here, and my action for the button isn't apply a bookmark or clear a selection or clear fields or select values or select excluded. I want to execute an automation. When I do that, I am now given a list, and the one I'm going to choose is, hey, I need some input parameters. Okay, so I want to pick that input parameters one. Now, what happens behind the scenes here that you need to know? What this is going to want to do is pass the application ID and what you don't even see, which is a bookmark ID. So let me show you bookmarks here, because this is going to be really important to understand. You'll notice I have no private bookmarks now. If I'm going to try to pass this application and the values that I've selected, I could have hundreds or thousands of these in values, right? I'm not passing one row at a time. I want to pass all of my selections. What it's going to do for this particular action is create a bookmark behind the scenes that has these housekeepers and these rooms as values in the filters. And so let me come and look at what this automation does. So this is the input parameters. I get my start. You'll notice that I can look at my URL and it says, hey, I want you to pass me an application and a bookmark. Fantastic. And I'm going to output that so that I can show you what you passed me. As debugging, again, I want to know what were you thinking of? Why did you do what you did? Oh, because you passed me this. I've got my inputs defined for application and bookmark. This is a little bit weird. We'll get to this eventually as we're going through these basic building blocks. This is called sleep. What's happening here? When I am the Qlik dork working in this application, I have a session for this environmental services application up and running. But my automation isn't using my session. It's going to have its own session to work with it. And I need to give that a little bit of time to get spun up. I'm just giving it 10 seconds because there's times where our particular tenant is getting hammered by us doing demos and testing for our team around the world. So I've got a little bit of a sleep timer in there just to make sure that that session will spin up fine. We'll end up going through all of the cloud Qlik Cloud Services blocks eventually. A couple that I want to show you is this apply bookmark. What this is going to do is says, hey, I want to now in my new application automation session apply a bookmark that you've passed me. So when I press the button, it records my filters, creates a bookmark for those given filters, and I want to apply that same bookmark, so I'm looking at the same set of data in this application automation that I was in my QlikDork session of the app. That's going to filter the values. Then what I want to do is I say, ooh, I need to get the values out of this table. So here I was passing them one by one. What I want to do is get this entire table, and I'm going to iterate through those rows one by one. So don't get too hung up on that. The point of this video is about the inputs. I'm passing it the application. I'm passing it the bookmark. I apply that bookmark. I'm going to iterate through these values one by one, and I'm going to output the data for that row, that one item that I am on as I'm looping through. At the end I say, hey, by the way, I just processed all that data for you, right? And we'll just pretend that there's a whole bunch of really, really important automation steps here of action that I want to take as part of my active intelligence. So let's save that. Let me go ahead and go to close. This will show me my last run from when I was testing this a little while ago. And so I'm going to come back to here. I'm going to clear these selections, create completely new ones so that you'll see there's nothing up my sleeve. We're going to pick Rosa Alderson, Elizabeth Alston, and let's scroll way down here to Walter Miller. So I've picked these three housekeepers that you can see have worked in these several different units, and I'm going to pick several of these things. So we now have three different housekeepers, or four housekeepers, yeah, three housekeepers who've worked in these several different rooms. Again, if I wanted to call them one by one, I could. What I want to do is I'm going to call the automation. It's going to create a bookmark for me that we'll see, and it's going to go ahead and run that. So I press run here. Behind the scenes right now, in that automation, it is sleeping. I've passed it, the application ID, the bookmark, it's sleeping. When it wakes up, it's going to take that bookmark, apply it, and I would expect to see these values in my output window. So let's go take a look. Sure enough, Rosa Alderson, Elizabeth Alston, Walter Miller, and here are my values. Now, will I always want to have my automation up to come see my output? Of course not. You better not have said yes. That would be crazy, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to press F12 and bring my debugger window up in my browser. And let's go ahead. I'm going to change some of these selections, make some different ones just so that we've got a little bit of something new. And I'm going to go ahead and call this automation again, and you'll see with the networking window up, I will get to see what URL got called. And if I want to copy that URL, I can, so that I could then paste this into Postman or something to test with, or just record for posterity. And here's a really cool thing. If I click on that, it will show me the output from my automation so that I can debug to see if it worked or not. You see where I'm going with that, little Mr. Inputs? This is kind of the important thing, because when I press the button, stuff just happens behind the scenes, and I'm not sure what it was. I need to know what it did. And maybe when I build this, and I do have a much bigger process here that goes out to ServiceNow if a value is 6, and creates a JIRA ticket if the value is 9, and sends a Teams message chat if the value is 6 or 8 or 10, right? I could output all of those things. So especially as I'm learning to become an RPA developer and learn how to use these different blocks in my makerspace, I get to see that output one by one. And the really cool thing, even working in QlikSense as I'm calling these things, I get to then see that output. Now, oh no, I'm doing the wrong things. Hope you have a great day, and I really hope you've learned something special about how to call automations, pass them inputs, use outputs, and most importantly, get your way on the road towards active intelligence. And for goodness sakes, don't forget to press the like button. Press the like button.